The GM moves his NPCs towards the PCs so they can stab the DPS and the tank in the back. In the meantime, the caster doesn't make its saving throw, so it doesn't get its AoE off the boot as well. Welcome to a world where apparently words don't make sense anymore. No matter if we're playing games or sports or even TRPGs, terms can be found everywhere. They're inevitable, as the very first thing we humans do when we like something is make it so that nobody else understands it. Only so we can explain it later again. So to try and make everything a bit easier to understand, I've categorized all of the terms and abbreviations into 4 different categories. Terms about story. Terms used during play. Terms about mechanics. Terms about players. There will be a slight overlap in terms and abbreviations, but I'd say in a few weeks it doesn't matter anymore anyway.
Since you'll be one of us anyway.
So let's begin, shall we? Game Master or Dungeon Master. The Game Master or the Dungeon Master is the one who inhibits mostly just everyone in the world, unless it's one of your characters. Character. A character is a personification of someone in the world. This could be a druid, a fighter, this could be captain of the guards, they're all characters. Player characters, those are the characters played by you guys at the table. This is your 5th level monk or your 3rd level druid, who are a band of adventurers and go out to slay evil demons. You also have non-player characters. These are all the characters in the game that are being portrayed by the Dungeon Master. The NPCs are a bit different from the monsters, since the monsters most of the time don't have a notable character. They're more counted as an encounter, which we'll get to later. Race. Race is most of the time what kind of fantasy race you have. It has nothing to do with if you're from Africa or from New Zealand, doesn't matter. This is about being an elf, dwarf, gnome, or a human, or whatever you want to be. Next up is class. Class is sort of the job that you hold in this world. Job is maybe a bit of a big number for that, but still. Simply said, think of everything that you can play, like your druid, your fighter, your monk, your wizard, sorcerer. Those are all classes. Next up are a few terms to specifically talk about what you're playing. Campaign. Think of this as the whole series. Everything from season 1 to season 20. However long you're playing. Next up is the adventure. The adventure is one story arc, or better said, maybe a season. Season 1 of this is your first real adventure in this campaign. Quest. A quest is one of the many given tasks that you need to do, so maybe you think of it a little bit of a story beat or a plot point in a series. And after that you've got a session. A session is just a single episode. It's 1 day worth of playing. It could be 4 hours, could be 8 hours, depends on how long you play. Now these 4 that I just described are talking more about story and plot points and making an actual tale, a legend. A lot of players just mainly like to go in, slay some monsters and be done. That type of game would mostly be categorized as a dungeon crawl type of game where you just go in, room by room, loot everything, kill everything. And as last 2 points for terms about story, we've got encounter and random encounter. Now an encounter is most of the time a small little plot point or something interesting or anything else that happens in the story which poses a challenge to the players. This could be an encounter with a monster. As long as it's challenging to your players, you can count this as an encounter. Next up we also got random encounters. Random encounters are a bit of the same variant. You're still challenging the players, but this has nothing to do with the story overall. Maybe they're just sleeping in a forest and you know that there's a bear prowling around. There's your random encounter.
You know, if you start sleeping in the forest without taking water or anything like that, it's kinda normal if you get a bear in your face.
So next up will be terms used during play. First of all, we got 4 character archetypes. The DPS, or damage per second, is most of the time the character that excels at dealing damage. It's what they're best at. Think of maybe a sorcerer, or think of the rogue who stabs someone in the back with all its sneak attack damage. Those types of characters often don't have a lot of HP or defense, but they are great at dealing a lot of damage to a singular target. Or sometimes, if you're a caster, a lot of targets at the same time. They're kind of OP. Next up is the tank. The tank is most often the character archetype that has the most defensive value. It can take a lot of hits, it won't go down fast, and most of the time it's the one that also tries and gets the target to attack them, so the other players can just go around and start hitting it from all sides. After that we got the healer class. The healer class, as it would say, heals damage. Now whenever damage has been done in real time by monsters or by traps or anything like that, it's most of the time up to them to make sure that the damage that has been dealt is being dialed back a bit. They've also got a different type of healer, which is what I call a prevention healer, which most of the time tries to specialize itself in preventing damage being done, instead of healing it after it's been done. And last but not least, you've got the support/controller character. These characters typically just excel at giving their friends an advantage in the battlefield. Maybe they use a grasping vine to hold down the enemies, to make sure that they can't move, but you can easily move around them. Or maybe they make the enemies sleepy, so that they're all sleeping on the ground and you've basically won already. Something else you might hear a lot is the word caster. As you might suspect, a caster casts spells. I know, ridiculous. Something else that you might hear a lot is the word party. Not something festive, you could make it something festive, but most of the time it's just the word that applies to your group of players, your group of PCs that you're playing. Maybe you find another band of adventurers in the world and they could also be a party. And maybe you could all make a large party and get ale and everything else and then be an actual party. The next term would be natural. You hear this a lot when it comes to natural 20s, or rolling your die and getting a 20 out of it on a 20-sided die. Natural just basically means whatever the number is on the die itself without adding your modifier. And the last one in this category would be dice pool. Now dice pool is very easy. It's the group of dice that you use for a certain roll. Maybe you've got a massive firestorm which lets you deal 66. Then this would be your pool.
Just a general word of advice. Don't go swimming in your dice pool. It's not gonna be nice.
Up next we got terms about mechanics. First of all, initiative. See what I did there? Initiative is the main statistic that you use to see how quick you can react to something. This is most often used to decide the turn order when battle comes around. Which is also why roll your initiative is most often the most terrifying phrase you can ever hear. Up next is AC. AC is your main defensive stat. It's the stat that tells you how well you can avoid damage.
Which is a good thing.
This can either be from being very live and full of movement so you can barely be hit. This can also be just because you're wearing plate mail and nothing can penetrate it. Needless to say, the higher, the better. Up next we got HP, or better known as hit or health points. Hit or health points is the amount of life force your character had depicted in numbers. Generally, of course, with this as well, higher is better, but a lot of classes don't really let you go too high. HD would be your hit dice. There's a lot of confusion about this from time to time, but this is simply set the die that you use to calculate your HP. For example, if you're a fighter, you get a D10. This D10 means that every time you level, you get a D10 added of HP value to your maximum HP. This could be 1, this could be 10, that depends on what you roll. Next up is DR, or better known as damage reduction. Damage reduction is simply said a way that your character has of reducing any form of damage that it comes in. Say you have damage reduction 2, that means that every time you take damage, you take 2 damage less than a normal person would. Not bad to have, I'd say. By the way, this is how you deflect bullets with your skip. Just make sure that your damage reduction is ridiculously high. Up next would be CR, or better known as challenge rate. Challenge rating is something that most of the time the GMs use to see what kind of level of challenge we need to put against our players. It's calculated against the average player level. Most of the time the difficulty of an encounter can be ranged from somewhere between 1/8 of an CR up till 30 to 40 even.
You probably won't find 40, but if you see it, run for your life.
Now let's discuss some types of rolls that you can make. First off, we have a saving throw. Saving throw is simply said you trying to escape some form of danger that's right in front of you, or some kind of bad affliction that might befall you. Say for example you've drunk poison. That's bad. So you make a saving throw to see if the poison will affect you or not, or if your body can break it down beforehand. Say you activate a trap, and the trap just shoots a few daggers right at your face. Then you can make a saving throw to see if you can duck away in time. We also got another type of roll, it's named a skill check. Skill check most of the time just looks if you can do something. Maybe you try and climb something, then you make a climb skill check. Maybe you try to talk someone into doing something that they normally wouldn't want to do, so you make a diplomacy check. Or, I don't know, maybe you try and see how much a golden orb of awesomeness is worth. Then you make an appraise check. Next up would be an attack roll. An attack roll is the roll that we use to see how well we can hit something, not how well we can damage something. That would be a damage roll. Modifiers and bonuses are things that we can add to the result of our roll. So for example, if we roll an 18 on a climb check and we're real good at climbing, we might get a +8. So that means that instead of an 18, we now have a 26. Which means it makes it a lot easier for us to climb something. And because we have a +8 on our climb check, it's a lot easier for us to make a general DC, or better known as difficulty check. The difficulty check is most often the figure that we're trying to reach when we try and do something. For example, an AC of a monster might be the difficulty check that we need to make to try and hit it. If its AC is 17, then the difficulty check would be 17 for us to hit it. Next up would be AoE, or Area of Effect. Area of Effect is simply set the target area of an effect that you use. This could be a spell, this could be an item, this could be an ability or anything like that. Say for example, if you roll a fireball out and it explodes, then maybe everything within a 20 feet radius of that burns to ashes and cinder. Up next will be an attack of opportunity. Attacks of opportunity are attacks made when someone else is distracted. Say for example you stand right in front of a foe and it starts talking to his friend. You smack the in the face. Up next will be CL, or better known as caster level. Caster level is the amount of levels that you have in a class that can do magical abilities. Say for example a sorcerer or a wizard. Your caster level is used for calculating effects on spells and other types of magical effects. Never forget though, your caster level is only for the classes that actually have magical properties. For example, if you take 2 levels in fighter, you will still have a caster level of 0. Last of all in this category we have spell level, or better known as SL. Spell level is simply set the level of the spell. This can be 1 until 9. Most of the time this just simply indicates how powerful the spell is going to be. Up next we got terms about players. There are only 5 of these. Well, there are probably more, but none of that I know, for now at least. And these are the type of players that you are sitting with. This is out of game, but the way people are playing. First of all, we got a metagame. Metagaming is, simply said, just making your character do stuff in-game which it shouldn't know. For example, maybe your friend has read the monster manual and knows that zombies are very weak against radiant damage. However, his character wouldn't have known that, so his character wouldn't have known that he would need to use radiant damage to, simply said, finish off the zombies. That would be metagaming. Up next is the power gamer, or also known as the min-maxer. The power gamer tries to do everything to optimize his character, make sure it deals the most damage, make sure it always succeeds in almost every kind of skill check that it wants to succeed in. Everything has been calculated to the last number to make sure that they can do everything the most optimal and perfect way. Welcome to the min-maxer. Min-maxers also can just go overboard and go even further than it should be, and that's where we come to munchkins. A munchkin is a very competitive player. They are the players that start running to get every piece of loot there is. They want everything for themselves and they think they are the best players that are there and should do everything on their own. These players you often don't want to keep in your group. Up next would be the rules liar. Rules liar most of the time knows all of the rules, knows them from heart, doesn't even need a book for it anymore because he's just so dedicated to the rules that he's just spent weeks learning the whole book.
This whole book. Yeah, I know.
Most of the time these players insist on following the rules. They know them by heart, everything must go exactly as the rules entail it. If you have a rules lawyer in your game, try and see what the point of view is. Most of the time they're just trying to help, so explain to them what they can help with, what they can't help with, and keep it simple. Tell them that some rules are going to be changed and then they're probably going to be fine with it. If they're not fine with it, make a sheet, write it on there and say it's a homebrew rule and then they're probably fine with it. Up last is a very violent player, which we call the murder hobo. Murder hobo, simply said, is a player who just goes there for the kill. It doesn't really care to him what type of story is going on. It doesn't really care of him if the main enemy is an orc or an elf or a dragon. As long as he can go in and start smashing things. Your typical barbarian, only then in player form. Now, to finish this up, let me quickly explain how dice notation works. Dice notation, simply said, just explains the amount of dice and the type of dice that you need to be using. For example, if something says 2d6, that means you need to roll 2 6-sided dice, in which the 2 in the beginning tells you the amount of dice, the D is the abbreviation for die, and the last number, the 6, would be the type of dice that you need to use. So for example, maybe I need to roll 5d6, which would look like this. Or maybe the game would ask me to roll 3d10, which would look like this. And there you go! A quick introduction to an endless array of terms and abbreviations that we can use in TRPGs. Now, if it all went a little bit too fast for you, I've made an easy cheat sheet that you can print out and keep with you just for at least the first few weeks until you know most of them. But hey, you can also just watch this video another 40 times or something. You can find a link to the cheat sheet in the lookbox somewhere down there. If you thought this was useful, please use those handy dandy like buttons down below and fill the comment section with your feedback and suggestions about future episodes. Until then, just keep rolling!
I'm horrible at this. Your cost level is used for Up next we'll try and up next we'll start the beginnings of how to create it. Up next we'll start Jesus, next has become a very strange word.